Hello and welcome. I hope that you're doing well. In this video, we're going to start to take a look at forms and inputs in order to see how we can give inputs to our JavaScript files. This will allow us to sort of complete the full cycle of interactions between HTML and JavaScript. We'll be able to provide inputs from JavaScript or from HTML into JavaScript, and then provide outputs from JavaScript into HTML. With this, you'll now have all of the tools that you need to write functional JavaScript code, and you'll be able to develop your understanding of building web pages further. So let's take a look at how we can do inputs and using forms in HTML. So I'll come over to the code here. I'm going to once again do this on the by page. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a new element known as a form. And a form typically has a name so that you can uniquely identify it. And I'm just going to name mine test form. What a form is it's essentially a way of taking input from a user. A form can have things like inputs and various different input types, right? So you can have like text boxes, we can have like combo boxes, all sorts of different inputs. And then we'll typically have a button that allows us to submit the form. So once that button is pressed, everything from that form is sent off somewhere else for it to be processed. So it allows us to group together a whole bunch of inputs into a single submission that is then sent to our backend to be processed. That's the idea of what a form is going to do for us. So with this, we could do a variety of different things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some text that says, let's say, how many products would you like to buy? So we'll do something like that. And then we'll put in an input box. So this will be an input. So an input is essentially just like some way of adding input into our HTML. The type for this one is going to be text. It's going to be just like a text box that we can input data into. And as I was discussing with the form, we typically give this a name so it's uniquely identified. And I'll call it input box in this case. The name is what we're going to use in JavaScript to actually reference this input. So rather than using IDs, I'm showing you a different sort of idea, which is referencing it by name. So now once we have this input box, what we're going to have is the following. Let's go over to our web page quickly. And you can see how many products would you like to buy? And then we have this input box here to input data in. Now, what we can do is we can come back over here and we can add in a button to allow us to submit this form. So I can go input, type equals button. And then the on click for this button is going to run our my function. So the one that I have declared throughout this whole video. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to give my function something in these brackets. And that something is going to be called this.form. What I'm doing is I'm giving JavaScript a reference to this form that we have declared. So we're passing it to the JavaScript code. And to help facilitate that in the JavaScript code, we need to put form in the brackets here, like I've done already. What's going to happen is when we submit this, it calls this function, giving it all of the form data. So all these inputs that are associated with this form. And then that's going to get sent over here, and then we can use that to actually process the data. So that's the main idea of what we're doing here. So in addition to this form, I'm also going to give it a value, which is just what's displayed inside of the button. So in this case, the value is going to be submit. So it'll just say submit inside of the button. And that is going to be the end of my form. So before going on, let's just see what that looks like. So let's go over to our browser. Let's go ahead and refresh this. As you can see, we now have this submit button, which is able to trigger the my function portion of the code. So understanding that, let's actually write the code for my function. So we come over here, and what I want to do is I'm just going to output the value that was inserted into this text box. I'm going to do that using an alert. So I'm just going to say alert. And the way that we do this is we say form.inputBox.value. So form is, of course, a reference to this HTML form here. It's the thing that we passed into this function. Input box is this input here, right? Because its name is input box. That's how we're referencing it. And then value gets the value inside of that input box. So it actually gets the value of the input box and alerts it onto the screen. So let's go ahead and check that that is working properly. So we come over here, and then what we'll do is we'll put something inside of here. So let me just put in some text. So I'll just say like test. I press on submit, and oh, I'll have to refresh the page. Let's try that again. And you can see we get an alert that says test. So you see it actually does pass that input into our JavaScript. So it looks like that is working successfully. So that gives you an idea of how we can provide inputs to our JavaScript. So you now have an idea of how to input as well as how to output. And that gives you sort of all the things that you need to interact between HTML and JavaScript. Of course, there's a lot more things that you're able to do, but these are the core fundamental things that we would want. Before we sort of end off here, I want to discuss these input types. There's a variety of different input types that exist. For instance, number actually would be a more appropriate one because we're talking about a quantity of items to buy. Let me just show you what that looks like. When I refresh this, you can see it gives me a numeric entry now. So this will only take in numeric values. So I just want to note that there's a few different types of inputs, right? It's not just text. There's number, there's password, there's a lot of different ones that exist. So there's one that should fit any sort of data type that you need to actually input into a text input. So that's everything for this video. At this point, you have a good understanding of the various different inputs and output methods that JavaScript provides to you. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.